All right, buckle up for this one. Today, we're diving headfirst into Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy's idea for a Department of Government Efficiency.
DOGE.
Yeah, DOGE.
It's catchy.
Well, the idea itself is pretty massive. We're talking about auditing and basically restructuring how the entire U.S. government spends money.
It's ambitious.
Ambitious is putting it mildly. I mean, the potential savings they're talking about, but also the potential downsides.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like, remember how Musk completely flipped the script with Tesla and SpaceX?
Totally.
It's that kind of shake-up energy, but aimed at the government this time.
So less clinky bureaucracy, more like super efficient rockets. Oh, I'm listening, but how do we even unpack all this?
Well, we've got some pretty intense source material to work with. It's a debate, actually, between someone who's really gung-ho for DOGE
Okay.
and a regulatory expert who's, shall we say, skeptical.
Sounds spicy, like a policy showdown.
Exactly.
All right, let's hear what the DOGE advocates got. I get the sense they're all about lean government, trimming the fat.
Right. Their whole thing is get rid of anything redundant, scrap outdated processes, and bam, DOGE could save, get this, trillions of dollars.
Trillion.
$2 trillion, they claim. And that's just for starters. Imagine infrastructure projects that actually move, regulations that make sense, and government agencies operating like, I don't know, nimble startups. That's their pitch.
$2 trillion. That kind of money could do a lot of good. But there's got to be a flip side here, right? What's our regulatory expert saying?
They're definitely pumping the brakes on the hype. Their big worry is that slashing and burning like that could cripple essential government functions.
Like what?
Well, think about it. Workplace safety, protecting the environment, consumer rights, all that stuff relies on the government doing its job.
Yeah, it can't just go cutting willy-nilly.
Exactly. And they have some pretty specific examples. Their point is, if you gut these agencies, you end up with overworked employees, services start to tank, you get crazy wait times, maybe even total system meltdowns.
Yikes. So, imagine needing your passport renewed, or worse, trying to access healthcare benefits, and the whole system is running on fumes.
Yeah, not a pretty picture.
Okay, so efficiency is great, but not at the cost of basic services. This is getting complicated. And there's something else bugging me. What about Musk's role in all of this?
Ah, that's where the conflict of interest question comes in.
Huh.
Our expert makes a good point. Musk has a history with government agencies, shall we say.
Yeah, he's not exactly known for playing by the rules all the time.
Right. And his businesses could actually benefit from a lot of the deregulation DOGE is pushing.
Yeah.
So is this about making government better or just tilting the scales in his favor?
Valid point. But in fairness, let's hear the DOGE folks out. Didn't they say something about smart cutting, not just slashing everything?
They did. Their argument is it's not about firing everyone and shutting everything down. It's more like identifying what's not working and streamlining stuff.
Okay, so less cutting, more like strategic pruning.
Right. Making government leaner and meaner, in theory.
Give me an example, though. What does that look like in reality?
They're really hung up on government procurement, all the purchasing processes. It's a mess.
I can imagine.
The paperwork, the approvals, everything's super slow and inefficient. Just imagine trying to buy office supplies for a government agency.
Sounds like a nightmare.
Total nightmare. But the DOGE advocate says, hey, we've got these awesome data systems now. We can make all this faster, cheaper, more transparent.
So contracts get awarded fairly, resources are used properly, and we can actually see where our tax dollars are going.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm following so far. But does our regulatory expert buy this?
Yeah, not so fast. They think smart cutting sounds nice on paper, but the reality of government is way more complicated.
Right. Running a tech company isn't the same as, say, running national security or public health.
Precisely. It's not just about efficiency. It's about all these complex systems with huge implications. And the expert is worried about unintended consequences.
Hey, what?
For example, what if streamlining regulations sounds good, but ends up weakening protections for workers or the environment? Or what if messing with these systems disrupts the whole checks and balances thing that's supposed to keep government in check?
Yeah, don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly. Concentrating too much power in the wrong hands, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So it's a real dilemma, right? On one hand, this promise of a leaner government that saves us money and works better. On the other, we've got essential services, democratic safeguards, potential for things to go really wrong.
Yeah, it's a lot to weigh. So where does this DOGE debate go from here? What else did they cover?
Well, next they got into innovation and accessibility. And the DOGE advocate really tried to paint this picture of a truly modern government, one that's actually citizen-centric.
Okay, I'm curious. What does a DOG-powered government look like for the average person?
Imagine dealing with the government is as easy as, like, ordering something online.
Easy. The government.
I know, right? But that's the idea. Need to renew your driver's license? Boom, do it on your phone. Applying for benefits, simple website, walks you through everything. And all this, accessible to everyone, no matter your tech skills or where you live.
Sounds almost too good to be true. I bet our regulatory expert has some thoughts on this, too.
Oh, definitely. And this is where Musk's personality, or at least his reputation, comes in.
Fine.
They're saying that his whole leadership style, that super intense, demanding, move fast and break things approach,
Right.
that might not fly in the world of government, which is, well, let's just say it moves at a different pace.
Yeah, Silicon Valley speed's one thing, but government is a whole other beast. So what happens when those two worlds collide?
Well, the expert is worried about a few things. First, mass job losses in the public sector. If DOGE is all about automation and cutting costs, that means fewer government jobs.
Makes sense.
And then there's the question of essential services. If cuts are made too hastily, or without really thinking things through, it's the people who rely on those services who suffer the most.
So, is it even possible to overhaul the government this radically without causing chaos and hurting the people who need help the most?
That's the million-dollar question. And it leads to another concern. Can real innovation happen in an environment where everything is about cutting costs and avoiding risks? Government agencies need resources to try new things, and DOGE's obsession with efficiency could stifle that creativity.
This is getting more and more complicated. We've gone from potential trillions in savings to essential services being at risk to people losing their jobs. What's next on our list?
Well, let's shift gears and talk about how all this would impact different sectors of the economy. That's where we start to see potential winners and losers emerging. The DOGE advocate, they think certain industries would actually flourish, like tech and renewable energy.
So less red tape, more green tech.
Exactly. Their vision is you cut regulations, things get streamlined, and boom, you've created this perfect environment for innovation and new businesses popping up.
Sounds pretty good on the surface, but I'm sure our regulatory expert has some counterpoints.
Oh yeah, they're not convinced. They're saying, sure, some sectors might win big, but others could get hammered. Like, what about the public sector itself?
Government jobs.
Tons of government jobs could vanish. If DOGE is all about shrinking government and automating everything, well, people lose their jobs.
That's a big concern. And what about the average person, not just government workers? How does this affect them?
That's the expert's big point. This whole DOGE obsession with cutting costs, it could mean essential services take a hit. Think healthcare, education, Social Security, all that could be on the chopping block.
So like a ripple effect. You cut here, and it impacts everything else.
Exactly. But the DOGE advocate, they have an answer for this, of course. They say all the money saved would let the government reinvest in those key areas, so ultimately, services would actually be better and more efficient.
More efficient government, that's the dream, right? But I'm still not sold on the idea that everyone comes out ahead.
Yeah, that's the real debate, isn't it? Efficiency versus fairness. Can you have both? Big questions. To really understand this, I think we need to zoom in on one specific area.
Right?
Regulations.
Ah, yes, regulations, everyone's favorite topic. This is where the debate gets really intense.
Lay it on me.
For the DOGE advocate, regulations are the enemy. They're like this huge roadblock to progress, slowing everything down. Their argument is a lot of regulations are outdated, redundant, just a burden.
So cut the red tape, unleash the free market, all that.
That's the gist. They think less regulation means businesses can invest more, create jobs, develop new technologies, basically. The economy takes off.
But what about all the things regulations are meant to protect? I'm guessing our regulatory expert has a lot to say about that.
Oh, they definitely do. They're reminding us that regulations exist for a reason. To protect workers, consumers, the environment. You weaken those regulations and you're opening the door to all sorts of bad stuff. Workplace accidents, environmental damage, scams. It's a recipe for disaster.
So it's a tough balancing act, right?
Yeah.
We want businesses to thrive, but not at the cost of people's safety or the planet. Exactly. And this is where the whole checks and balances thing comes in.
Checks and balances, remind me what that means again.
Basically, it's a system of safeguards built into the government to make sure no one person or group has too much power.
Okay, like guardrails on a highway, keeping things from going off track.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
So the regulatory expert is worried that DOGE could screw up this whole system. If you concentrate too much power in the wrong hands, things can go south pretty quickly.
Less oversight, less accountability, not a good combination.
Right. They're concerned that DOGE is so focused on efficiency that it forgets about things like transparency and democratic processes. Those things matter.
They do. So it's not just about saving money and streamlining things. It's about the bigger picture, how these changes affect the way our government actually functions.
Absolutely. And this leads to another important idea: institutional knowledge.
What's that?
It's like the collective wisdom and experience of the people working in government agencies. It takes time to build up that expertise, and it's essential for making good policies.
So like the brain trust of the organization.
Exactly. And the expert is worried that DOGE's whole downsizing restructuring thing could lead to a massive loss of institutional knowledge.
People get laid off, experienced people leave, and suddenly you're missing all that expertise.
And it takes a long time to get that back. In the meantime, important stuff might fall through the cracks. The expert's point is, if you're going to do DOGE, you got to have a plan for preserving that institutional knowledge, or the consequences could be serious.
This is getting so nuanced. We've got the potential upsides of DOGE, like efficiency, maybe more innovation, but then there's all these downsides, risks to essential services, people losing jobs, weakening regulations and oversight, and now this whole institutional knowledge thing.
It's a lot to unpack, for
Yeah.
sure. And I think both sides of the debate have valid points. It's complicated.
No easy answers here. It's about weighing those benefits against the risks and figuring out what works best for everyone, not just a select few.
And that's where I think the conversation needs to go next. We've heard the arguments, looked at the evidence, but now it's time to step back and think bigger. What are the alternatives to DOGE? Are there other ways to reform government without causing so much disruption or risking unintended consequences?
Yeah, that's the key question, isn't it? If DOGE isn't the answer, what is?
Well, there are a few other approaches out there, some more incremental, some more collaborative. And that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. We'll look at how these different models might achieve similar goals to DOGE, but in a way that's maybe more balanced, more thoughtful, and less risky.
Okay, I'm ready for part 3. Let's get into it. So DOGE is like, blow it all up and start over. Our regulatory expert is more like, whoa, hold on, let's think this through. But if those aren't the only options, what else is out there? How else can we make government better?
Well, one idea that's gaining a lot of traction is this concept of incremental reform.
Incremental reform.
Yeah, think of it like, regularly taking your car in for a tune-up instead of waiting for the engine to explode.
Yeah. Okay, I'm following.
It's about making small, data-driven improvements all the time within the systems that already exist, instead of trying to do this massive overhaul all at once.
So less revolution, more evolution of government.
Exactly. It could involve things like simplifying all that bureaucratic red tape, upgrading technology that's ancient, or even borrowing best practices from the private sector. The key is you do these things gradually, strategically, and you're always watching to see what the impact is and adjusting if you need to.
Sounds a lot less chaotic than the DOGE approach. But wouldn't it take forever to see real change?
It would take time, for sure. But the argument is it's a safer approach. You're less likely to have these unintended consequences, and you can make sure those essential services keep running without interruption.
That makes sense. Are there any examples of this actually working, like in the real world?
Oh yeah, lots of governments are doing this. It's called digital transformation.
Digital transformation.
Basically, it's about using technology to streamline everything, make services better, and make the whole government more transparent, like bringing government into the 21st century.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it seems like it could appeal to both sides, those who want efficiency and those who are worried about essential services.
Exactly. It's kind of a middle ground.
What about working with the private sector? Could that be part of the solution?
Definitely. Public-private partnerships are becoming more and more common.
What's that like when the government teams up with a private company?
Yeah, exactly. It's about combining the expertise of both. Like, imagine the government partnering with a tech company to build a better online platform for accessing government services.
So the government gets the best technology and the company gets to, apply their skills to a real-world problem. Seems like a win-win.
It can be, but there's always the question of accountability. How do you make sure these partnerships actually serve the public and not just the interests of the company?
Right, because that's a valid concern.
Absolutely. You need really strong oversight and a commitment to transparency to make sure these partnerships are truly collaborative and that the focus stays on the public good.
Okay, so we've got incremental reform, digital transformation, public-private partnerships. Anything else we should be thinking about?
One more thing that's really gaining momentum: evidence-based policymaking.
Evidence-based.
Yeah, basically it means using data and research to inform decisions. So instead of just going with your gut, you look at the evidence, you see what works, and you make decisions based on that.
So less guessing, more knowing what's actually going to work.
Right. It involves doing research, collecting data, seeing how different approaches play out. Like, let's say the government wants to start a program to reduce poverty. They could do a pilot study, test different methods, and then see which one actually produces the best results.
That seems like just common sense.
It does, right.
Yeah.
But it's not always how things work. Evidence-based policymaking helps ensure that resources aren't wasted and that taxpayer money is being used effectively.
Makes sense. And it also forces policymakers to be more transparent about how they're making decisions.
Exactly. If you have to back up your choices with evidence, it's harder to just make decisions based on politics or personal preferences. It's about making the process more objective.
Okay, so it seems like there are quite a few alternatives to this whole DOGE shock and awe approach, and they all have their own pluses and minuses. It probably depends on the situation which one works best.
Yeah, there's no one magic solution. The government reform is messy, it's complex, it's ongoing, it takes a lot of thought, a lot of dialogue, and a willingness to experiment and adapt.
Well, we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive. DOGE, the potential benefits, the risks, alternative ways to reform government, all these big ideas about checks and balances, institutional knowledge, evidence-based policymaking.
It's been a whirlwind, but hopefully it's given everyone listening a better grasp of this whole debate. It's a big one.
Definitely. And I think the main thing to remember is this isn't just some theoretical policy discussion. This stuff affects your life, everyone's lives. The decisions we make about how we govern ourselves, they have real consequences, and it's up to all of us to stay informed, stay engaged, and use our voices to shape the future we want.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So as we wrap up, I'll leave you with some food for thought. What parts of DOGE resonated with you? What worries you the most? Do we need radical change, or are there better ways to improve government? And maybe most importantly, what role do you want to play in all of this?
These are great questions to consider. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into DOGE and the whole world of government reform. Keep thinking about these issues, stay curious, and keep learning. The conversation doesn't end here.